it's exciting that we're doing a podcast today. So we are. I didn't realize that there was a tea time yesterday video that was talking about whether or not we would get a roadmap for what's going to happen for the beginning of 2023. So that was a little bit of what I wanted to discuss and more. So you might get some different content that you got yesterday, maybe more memes. I don't know, maybe less seriousness. But I feel like the last time I was talking to you, Teapot, it was either right before I had Oscar or right after I had Oscar. And he's now almost 9 months old, so it's been that long. And
Wow.
I think the last time we were talking, you were either just about to go on an almost break or had started going on an almost break. And I think it was like to actually like go outside, like touch grass type thing. So how did that work out since then? What have you been up to?
I didn't touch grass quite as much as I wanted to be honest. You know, I got sucked back into the void. There's been a lot going on. Not so much in the game, to be honest, but I've been working on a lot of projects, you know, with the website, right, and competitive play as well. So there's been a lot of stuff happening, whirring along in the background, trying to do YouTube, trying to make my streams good and exciting and have content. I did the Zero to Hero stuff. I mean, wow. It's been a busy time for me. I've been grinding, on the grind.
So and I actually saw your YouTube videos for the Zero to Hero. So yeah, 44 months. Holy cow, thank you. Like just for a minute. Thank you so much for the resub. 44 months, that's awesome. But yeah, I saw those videos. So what prompted you to do a Zero to Hero? Was it just like figuring out what content you wanted to do like while you were waiting, or was it something that you've always wanted to do, or was it a suggestion?
So it was kind of, I did it at the same time as the Steam launch because I thought, oh, you know, that's kind of an interesting thing to do. But the really big idea that prompted me to do this is that I think a lot of players have difficulties with things that a lot of players consider to be common knowledge. Right. In other words, I don't think common knowledge is all that common in Guild Wars 2 whatsoever, and that's no, you know, I'm not saying oh these new players they're all noobs. No, I just think that there's a lot of like mysterious stuff. There's a lot to learn, and I think that you know that isn't expressed super well. And the really big one was gold, right? I've had multiple players come to me. And, you know, I've been doing some basic farming on stream. I say, hey, here's a meta train you can do. Hey, you can go and do fractals, right? And I had multiple players, and this was before the Zero to Hero. Multiple players accused me of lying.
Wait,
right?
Lying about
This was the big thing that really prompted it, seriously.
But lying about it being easy to make gold, or like...
Yeah, faking the results.
Oh, faking the results, okay.
Yeah, multiple players saw all the gold per hour I was getting. I was getting like a little bit over 20 gold an hour by doing a meta train. Again, fractals, you're kind of getting 20 gold for doing a set of fractals. And stuff.
Sure.
And multiple players, they were in disbelief, right? This was like quite common. People thought, wow, how is that possible? And I was talking to a lot of viewers. I was talking to YouTube comments. I was talking to players, you know, just about the place, right? And I would ask them, like, how much gold do you guys get an hour? And they would say, oh, you know, I like 5 gold an hour. Like, you know, I get like 5 gold a day sometimes. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean you're getting 5 gold an hour? What do you mean you're getting 5 gold a day? How is that possible? And, you know, the really interesting thing is that it really just does come down to kind of a knowledge game, right? Like a lot of players, for example, sell their items to the vendor instead of selling them to the trading post. A lot of players don't check the material storage. You know, I made a video about this, about the material storage stuff. And then, you know, the comment section is just full of people saying, oh yeah, I just made 300 gold because I had all my materials piled up for like a month and I just didn't check them. So that was like the really big thing about the Zero to Hero. And I wanted to take a slightly different approach with content, with kind of guide content, to kind of blend it with entertainment a little bit. This is something that I actually see in a lot of other MMO spheres, is that the guide element will be blended together with something that's supposed to be just kind of some light entertainment at the same time. So essentially the Zero to Hero, the goal with that is to be a little bit amusing, and I'll try some fun stuff and do some, you know, wacky activities in the game, and, you know, we'll have a laugh. But also at the same time, I trick people into learning about the game.
That's the way you have to do it, apparently. But no, that's awesome. It's actually funny because I think around the time that I had taken my break to have Oscar and obviously to raise Oscar, was one of the things that everybody was upset about the difference in the rewards for fractals. And so with your Zero to Hero, has that affected the output of gold that you would receive from fractals as much as people thought it would? Or with a Zero to Hero type account, did it really not matter? It was just gold is gold.
See, I actually didn't even get to that type of content yet. That was the challenge mode fractals that got a little bit nudged. And players weren't... Okay, so players were obviously upset about gold being removed, but it wasn't really the gold that was actually causing, like, the really big upset. The issue is that they specifically targeted challenge mode fractals and removed some mystic coins. This was perceived to be something that basically is irrelevant to the actual in-game economy and specifically targets a very small group of players who already are pretty starved of content, and then they get further punished essentially for no reason. And honestly, that is pretty justifiable. The item that was removed in question was Mystic Coins. Mystic Coins, they mostly come from like daily login rewards, actually, right? Not even anything else.
Right.
And removing them there wasn't
Which
a little
opens
bit
up a whole new can of worms that we could discuss.
That's another fun name. Yeah, daily login
daily
rewards.
logins and AFKing, yes.
But yeah, that was why people were upset about it, is because I think that section of the community felt like they were essentially just getting shafted for absolutely no good reason, other than they wanted to make it look so the rewards were slightly more evenly distributed. But this was even stated, actually. This was posted about on the subreddit by one of the developers, an ex-developer now, actually. And they commented that it was saying like 90% of Mystic Coins, even higher than that, I think, come from login rewards. And it was like an incredibly small percentage of Mystic Coins actually come from fractal challenge modes. So that also made it worse, because players were like, oh yeah, you're now confirming to us that it's not because fractal challenge modes produce too many Mystic Coins. You just don't want Mystic Coins there, right? And you want to slightly nerf it. So obviously, people were a little bit upset about that, especially seeing as the players that really engage in that fractal challenge mode content were some of the most dedicated players in the game, right? You know, it's the hard content. You know, it's fractals, boom, farming, speedrunning, blasting. So it was like, oh wow, we invested all our time. And not only do the devs not release any more fractals, they also take our Mystic Coins.
Right, and I'm actually glad that we ended up coming to that subject somehow, because when it was, current, a lot of the stuff that I was seeing was that people were farming Mystic Coins to sell, and so most of the complaint about it was that it was less gold per hour for your time. I wasn't seeing as much of the people being upset of actually doing content versus just getting things from login rewards, and having that kind of like shut down and taken away from them. So that actually sheds light on it for me, because I didn't know that. And so originally I was like, I don't see the problem. But then again, I also wasn't logging in to do, fractals to receive those items. So,
to be a little bit more precise, the reasoning from Arena is because they put Mystic Coins in the new End of Dragon Strike missions. Yeah. You can get 10 a week there. So basically they moved them, except that, there's probably a few more now. I think you can get more on average if you do the End of Dragon Strike missions. That's another whole can of worms to it.
I know.
There are some issues there, right? If you buy the Mystic Coins, then you can't buy other stuff, right? Because it uses a weekly locked currency. Right. So, right? That's an entire other different meme. There are definitely some funky stuff with the reward structure. But yeah, to be super precise, people weren't really... people were obviously bothered about the gold per hour, but it wasn't actually a big deal. Like, you made, like, 1 gold less in your run of fractals, which is not the end of the world. Your gold per hour didn't really go down that much from fractals. I think it was more the symbolic gesture, right? Like, that's certainly my impression of it. It's the fact that a game mode that had been neglected for a pretty good amount of time, they were like, oh yeah, we're finally going to change something. Yeah, we're going to nerf your rewards. Have fun, right? You know what I mean? It wasn't the gold. It could have been like 50 silver or 10 silver, and people would have still been like, "Wait, what the hell? Why are you doing this?" Right? Like this is the update we get after all this time. You're nerfing us. feels bad.
It makes more sense talking about it this way because like I said, originally when I was talking about it and they were talking about the gold per hour, I was like, well, that sucks, but it's like a gold per hour, you know. But at the same time, there are also people that I had seen when I first started playing the game that I was talking about my first impressions, just to go on a slightly different note. And people were like, well, I'd like to play the game, but it's really hard to figure out how to make gold in the game. And I was like, well, no, it's depends on who, if like the people that you're watching, or if you're just, you know, learning through tooltips, or if you were acquainted with just the MMO genre in general. You know, there's different things that you might have picked up from other MMOs, like you had mentioned, you know, don't vendor things, sell them on the auction house type thing. And so I guess a gold per hour would make sense for those people. But at the time, it didn't make sense to me. But I wasn't thinking about, like, actually having the Mystic Coins and having them be moved to the new content and versus login rewards and that and AFK and all of that stuff, like you said, is a whole other can of worms. But just speaking of you doing these guides because of the Steam release. So I had discussed prior to actually going live that one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the Steam release because I wasn't here for it. And just in your opinion, how do you think it went? Did it actually bring in more people, or do you think it actually just brought in more accounts?
I think the Steam release did go pretty well. However, I think that ArenaNet never intended it to be, you know, oh yeah, there's a billion new players joining the game. Mm-hmm. I think it's very much setting the groundwork, right? I think that's what a lot of 2022 for ArenaNet was setting the groundwork.
Oh yeah.
It was, okay, let's get Season 1 back in the game. Okay, let's get an expansion so we've got some money. Okay, let's get Steam so that we're on this massive digital platform, right? So we can sell our game in the future. Let's make sure that the game's balance is a little bit better, right? And not completely scuffed, right? That was a lot of what was going on. They're looking at quality of life, right? Looking at performance, looking at getting World versus World alliances into play, right? That was 2022. And to be honest, I think actually quite a lot of that will continue. They're not done, right? I think a lot of that's going to continue for the foreseeable future into 2023. And honestly, I think it's a big job, right? This is not a trivial matter. I think Arena will be working on this, the kind of polishing of the game, right? And making sure that everything is the way it should be. And of course, it's essentially an infinite task, right? Every MMO is always doing this forever, but I think ArenaNet's got some catching up to do. They're going to be like super grinding on this, focusing on features for the foreseeable future.
Which I think is actually incredible because normally in order to get that done, other people would be focusing on the subscriptions, you know, and all of the revenue coming in from those to make sure that they can afford all of these changes in this framework and such. And so the way you talked about with releasing the expansion in order to make sure that they have funds is a really good way to go about it because of not having that subscription. And so not only is it a lot of work for undertaking, but it also costs a lot of capital. And so it's just really incredible that I think, in my opinion, that they're accomplishing so much right now. Like, I think it's long overdue, but it's incredible that they're accomplishing so much right now. And with that in mind, what do you hope to see from a future roadmap? Hopefully it's tomorrow, but we don't know. What are your hopes for what is going to be continued to be the future of Guild Wars 2 and ArenaNet?
So I think that what we're probably going to be getting, and this is something that, you know, it was a very sneaky thing, you know, a little last minute bit of information that they dropped in at the end of 2022 in their kind of goodbye post. I think they're going to be sharing their long-term vision for the game.
I hope so. I mean, they mentioned the expansion, or that it was locked in. Yeah.
And yeah, I think we're going to be hearing a little bit about what does that look like what is an expansion, and also the plan. Like, okay, well, we're going to do an expansion every 2 years, right? Oh, we're going to do, you know, this is what Living World is going to look like, right? Living World Season 6, because right now we don't know anything, right, about Living World Season 6. And of course everyone's talking about it because that's the next thing, right? Should be coming up pretty soon, but no one knows anything about it, right? And I think that ArenaNet are going to communicate, okay, well, this is what a Living World season is going to look like from now on. Oh, yeah, this is what an expansion is going to look like from now on. Because there are some big question marks over all of the stuff, in my opinion. Are there going to be new elite specializations? Are they going to take a slightly different approach? Are they going to add a new weapon, for example? Would they maybe add a new core specialization instead of an elite spec instead? Because of course the game's getting a little busy right now, so it's a little bit unusual, right? With how they're going to go about doing this, right? Like what's the feature? So what's the next big feature? This is something that Ender Dragons actually struggle with a little bit. Heart of Thorns had the mastery system as a whole, right? And that was like a big feature update. Then of course Path of Fire, the big one, and honestly a feature that completely carried the game financially, mounts, right? That was a massive thing. Ender Dragons kind of didn't have that. It just had like a random mishmash of stuff that they probably had lying around at the office. And they're in a tough spot. Like, what are these going to be, these big new features that are going to be coming? And they won't give details on that, but they'll probably give us the image of what that looks like, right? The type of thing that we can be expecting in the future. And yeah, who knows how much detail we're going to get on all of this stuff, but that's what I'm expecting to actually see relatively early on this year. And in terms of like the roadmap stuff, yeah, they'll just say when the next story update's going to be. Maybe there'll be a little teaser, a few teaser images, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think we'll certainly know what's going to be coming for 2023.
I'm actually super excited, and I hope that they do discuss, if there is going to be a living world every, interval of time, because I believe I was chatting with you previously when I had come over from 14, and I was saying one of the things that I really liked about 14 is, like, their schedule way ahead of time. Like, all of these patches come out at certain times. What patches have story content, what patches have raid content, like when the expansion is normally, perceived to be, and I think that would be incredible for ArenaNet. And one of the things I would actually really love is they continued with the guild chats. Like, I know that they were doing it to hype up End of Dragons, but I think it would be incredible for even the release of the roadmap. You know what I mean? Like, I think it would be cool to just put together a guild chat, further discussing it a little bit, going a little bit more into detail, and having it be explained, you know what I mean, rather than just on text. Because I feel like regardless of how much detail you put into text, a lot of people misconstrue and come up with their own their own formula of how things are going to play out. I don't know if you've come across that yet, but I feel like when it's on text, a lot of people decipher it in different ways. And so I thought the guild chat was a really good way for them to get their point across.
Yeah, no, I think that having that actual visual communication is really important. Text is fine. Yeah, it definitely has its usages, and I think that the text communication from Arena has been very good. But I think there's something that is a little bit special about essentially having people on video where you can potentially even respond, right? I think that it really connects the developer to the community and to the player, right? Which I think builds a stronger relationship, and I think it really helps with building trust. Actually, is actually seeing people as they communicate with you, for sure.
And I know that was one of the things that we'd talked about previously, was that ArenaNet had quite a bit to accomplish, like big shoes to fill, to make sure that they were regaining people's trust. And do you think that they've been going in the right direction with that, especially recently?
Absolutely, yeah. I recently spoke about this, and I do. It really is. I won't shut up. It's worth talking about.
That's fine.
I think that the redemption arc that ArenaNet has had is actually rather remarkable, right? Like, I think just a few years ago, people were thinking the game is over. This is dead. ArenaNet has abandoned us. All hope is lost. And now I would say that the community is the most optimistic it's been for a very long time. I actually can't even remember when the community sentiment was this hopeful, right? And this optimistic and this positive towards the leadership team.
I mean, Sneb is back too.
Yeah.
So, like, that things are onward and upward. So are you at all, and this might be going a little bit too far in depth, but are you at all concerned with the amount of, like, change that there's been in the dev team recently? Like, they got an expansion out that was really good, really popular, and everybody said that they loved the story and loved a lot of the changes that were being made. And then we heard that certain people from, that side of development for the literary portion were going off to other projects. Are you at all concerned about that, or?
No. I think at the end of the day, I don't think a dev company really wants to put all of its eggs in one basket, regardless. And it's not really a surprise that they're working on they're potentially working on another project at the same time. I don't think that adding more developers necessarily gets you more content, right? Obviously, there's a certain amount of devs that you're going to need on a single project to get stuff done. But certainly speaking from experience, right? Like there can definitely be a case of too many cooks, right? Or just a point where it doesn't really actually get you anywhere by adding more people to the project. So I think it should be fine. I don't think it's going to be a big problem. As long as they still have plenty of developers and they're dedicated to Guild Wars 2 with their resources and their manpower, I don't really see it being a problem. That appears to be the case as well. That's all the statements from ArenaNet definitely point in that direction, that they're very heavily invested in Guild Wars 2. They're absolutely investing in the game and dedicating a lot of their resources to getting stuff done. And you can kind of see that we're seeing some pretty big systemic overhauls with DirectX 11 launching on Steam, and of course World vs. World Alliances. And hell, they've even got a balance team now, right? It's kind of weird, right? But Guild Wars 2, ArenaNet, for whatever reason, didn't really take balance that seriously until extremely recently, right? That's absolutely insane, right? Of course, right? That's crazy, right? That's the case, but it's true. And now they're taking that a little bit more seriously as well. So yeah, are ArenaNet working on other projects? Yeah, they are. Something with Unreal 5. And of course, hell, they're even working on expansion already, right? So it's not like they're all on board on the just making sure that the UI in Guild Wars 2 is completely perfect. But I think they'll be approaching it with an adequately staffed team.
Although speaking of which, though, since I've been back, there's some of your combos for fields and finishers highlight, and now there's an adventurer's guide that pops up where your quests are. Instead of just looking at the achievements, it actually tells you things you can do and rewards you for it. When did that happen? I came back in and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then I actually did one of them because obviously I was leveling a new character. I have multiple, 80s and whatever, and I know how the game works and everything like that for the most part. There are some things that I haven't done yet, but I was just like, oh, that's so cool. But the amount of XP it rewards you is crazy as well. When did that happen? What do you think of that? You think that's a step in the right... I mean, I think it's great because there are a lot of people that were concerned about the tutorial or lack thereof previously, especially with the Steam launch, having something like that that's a bit more in your face. Do this and you will enjoy your experience more.
Yeah, they did a lot of stuff like this. They did a bunch of A/B testing, stuff like what happens if we double the XP you get? What happens if you get a mount? Right? While you're playing through the core game, right? Does that make a player stick more in the game or less? And it turns out the answer is more. And part of that is because the core experience it's a little dated, right? It certainly isn't the equivalent of modern Guild Wars 2, that's for sure. So I think that ArenaNet really targeted making the core experience a bit quicker so that players kind of just get through it, progress fast, level up, boom, get the loot, get into the expansions, boom, get through that story. And yeah, this happened a while back. I don't know exactly when, but it is all relatively recently, and I imagine that ArenaNet will continue to do this as well. They updated some world bosses too. Some of the very first world bosses you'll encounter are now significantly reworked and even introduce you to core mechanics. For example, the fire elemental now sends out shockwaves, and the game prompts you to jump over them, introducing you to that mechanic. The great jungle worm fires out a bunch of red pulsing area attacks, and also you have to break defiance bars as well. So it introduces you to that mechanic, right? The frost shaman in Wayfarer Foothills, that guy now has a devastating spin attack that gives you an arrow to dodge out of the way of. All that kind of stuff. Some really good updates, I think, actually. It's one of the things I hope they continue to do, actually, is updating those old world events, because those world events can be, you can fit those with telegraphs that will then help players ease into other areas of the game and have a more modern Guild Wars 2 experience.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you mentioned that and with the term telegraphs because that's what I was going to say. Because one of the things that, I don't know if, again, a lot of my history has come from like WoW and 14, where like for 14, a normal raid shows all of the abilities being telegraphed. And then if you do Savage, a lot of the abilities are no longer telegraphed because you should know the tells. And so actually seeing that for world bosses that would mostly be done by people who aren't necessarily into raiding or doing fractals or anything like that, and they're just experiencing the game. Maybe they're leveling and they came across a world boss. It's, in my opinion, a lot better that they're telegraphed, and that's awesome. And I had no idea that all of these changes were being implemented. Like I said, I logged in and I was doing stuff and I started crafting and I was like, oh, I'm level like 37 now from 30 from just doing these crafting things. This is really cool. So I was absolutely super excited to see these changes. But one question I do have, and this is because I saw a video totally unrelated to Guild Wars 2, actually. I mean, MMOs in general and kind of like the progression from MMOs from MUD to MMO to, you know, whatever we're going to be in the future. Do you ever get nostalgic about the old days of Guild Wars 2? Like, is there any update that there has been that you've thought the game could do without? That you kind of miss, like how tough it was back in the day or something like that?
I actually like the old specialization system, or rather the old trait system, in my opinion. So, in my opinion, the big difference between modern MMOs and classic MMOs, whatever we want to call them,
Sure.
is that they held your hand a lot less, right? They were far less streamlined, and they were a lot more sandboxy in general. Mm-hmm. And personally, that's to my taste, right? You know, that's not for everyone, and that's fair, obviously. But I do like a very open-ended and free experience, which is certainly what Guild Wars 2 still is, but it was once even more so. And yeah, I think the big thing was the trait system. That was a really cool system. The thing that I liked about it was how weird and custom you could get. For example, now you pick 3 specializations. Mm-hmm. And then you have 3 choices per specialization, right? You got your 3 adept traits, you got your 3 master traits, and grandmaster. Now, in the old system, it was quite interesting because you could put points up to 30, right? And you could then have 3 choices, right?
Oh,
but here's
okay.
the thing. Here's the thing. You could pick, if you wanted to, 3 adept traits. You could pick 1 in the adept slot, 1 in the master slot, and then 1 in the grandmaster as well. You didn't have to pick a grandmaster trait. You could pick 2 master traits, right? Because you could put 1 in the master and then 1 in the grandmaster, right? Or you could just do the conventional setup of having 1 adept, 1 1 master, then 1 grandmaster. But you could do loads of different combinations there that I think were actually really interesting. And I think that type of system is something that I do actually really enjoy with the way that the game actually works. So yeah, that would be the one update that that was a cool system. It's a shame that we've gone this direction because right now the problem I actually have with build crafting in Guild Wars 2 is that you don't really. This is always true. There's always like a best in slot. There's always
sure. Like a cookie cutter setup, type.
right? There always is. But thing is now, when you're looking at builds, and this is especially true now, they've done this on purpose, and I don't blame them. They've made it so the choices are really obvious and less situational, right? You're going to be looking through your abilities and go, oh, yeah, this is the trait you pick if you want to do power damage. Oh, yeah, this is the trait you pick if you want to do condi damage, right? It's not quite as mushy and as situational, like, oh, this is a weird trait. This has an unusual interaction. I might use it here and not there, right? Everything is very streamlined now, but that's modern MMOs in general, in my opinion. That's not something that's specific to Guild Wars 2, but it has happened over the years. And I understand why, right? Because the old system and Guild Wars 2 in general is definitely, it's a lot to get your head around as a new player. Making all of these kind of weird esoteric choices is probably not going to help players on board into the game.
But it is funny that you mentioned that because like today, I had a really crappy day and I was like, I'm going to stream. It's like 9 o'clock. I'm going to stream. And so I get this stream in and I got to the story portion for Ascalonian Catacombs. So technically it's where I am in the story on my thief, and I'm like, I'm gonna do it. Does anyone want to do it with me? No, everybody's in bed. Well, I'm gonna solo it then. And so actually paying attention to the mechanics and everything for the dungeons and trying to solo it and coming up to different bosses and their mechanics, I think it was, funnily enough, I've always read my tooltips and created my builds for what I wanted to play. And like you said, it's very simple for your builds, you know, power versus condi versus whatever, survivability maybe. And I think it was the first time that I actually looked at my builds and my utility skills in such a way that's, okay, how can I solo these bosses? How can I reflect projectiles? How can I get the lovers away from each other when it's just me and I'm pulling the most aggro even off of, you know, Ritlock and Air for Ascalonian Catacombs? Like, what do I do? Oh, I should actually use, like, my racial utility, get my turrets out, and that can tank one of them while I try to grab the other one. And so it is kind of neat because I never would have looked at it that way. I would have looked at, well, I'm playing dual dagger and shortbow. And so dual dagger, condi. Okay, condi traits. I wouldn't have looked at it as, all right, I'm soloing something, so these are the mechanics that I need to deal with per boss. And I found myself swapping my mechanics or my utility abilities far more often than I ever would have had. So it is cool. It's kind of neat. That's one of the things that why I brought this up about missing old school type things, because it's one of the things that I would have done in, like, you know, TBC or something like that, because I didn't actually play vanilla WoW, where you would actually look at those things rather than trying to cheese or speed run a mechanic or, you know, running fractals, which don't take as long as dungeons. I was actually thinking about, okay, so I died this time. What did I die to? Is there any way that I can fix it with the utilities in the build that I have? So I don't know, it's kind of cool. I just realized how much I was nerding out just there. I'm sorry. I was really excited. I got like 3 bosses in on a Deadly Arts Thief. Mm-hmm. Like, I was super stoked.
Oh, yeah, no, 100%. I think that this is... yes, here we go. Let's get on the nostalgia train.
Let's do it.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that has been a little bit lost in games, is that I think a lot of older games really had a big problem-solving aspect. I think you brought up a great point there about this, is that, games used to have a lot of problem-solving, whereas nowadays, they're a bit more about execution, right? So in other words, the game will tell you the solution and say, okay, but now you've got to do it. You've got to beat it, right? Whereas previously, I think in old games, they would say, here's a problem, figure out how to do it, and then execute it. And it was actually a little bit less about the execution. I think a really good example about this is actually vanilla World of Warcraft, of course, and TNT as well. These games, they're not hard, right? You know, look, when I played vanilla WoW, I was like 9. Okay, if 9-year-old me can beat a video game, it is not a hard video game. Okay, not even close. Hell, you know, I think when Cataclysm came out, right, I think that game was considered to be quite difficult, right? The heroic dungeons in Cataclysm were like, whoa, these are hard. I was beating that shit no problem. Okay, I was farming it. It was easy, right? You know, yeah, it's obviously not that difficult. But the thing is that the way they challenge the player is a little bit different. Right? They're much more about thinking, okay, well, how am I going to approach this? How are you going to figure it out? Whereas I think a lot of more modern games are very much like, okay, you need to execute. And that's exactly how Guild Wars 2 is, in my opinion. It's very execution-oriented, which, funnily enough, actually, I think does actually provide a little bit of a barrier. I think in some ways, having it a bit more on the problem-solving in some aspects is actually a little bit friendlier to newer players because you're not so stressed about having to press all your buttons. Whereas I think button pressing is actually something that inhibits a lot of players in Guild Wars 2, right? Like, they get lost in the source.
It's actually funny. So if anyone heard any typing, that was me trying to figure out the math of Teapot saying that he was 9 during Vanilla WoW, and I was seeing how old I would have been during Vanilla WoW to see if I was older than you. So if you heard any typing, I'm older than Teapot. But no, you're absolutely right. And I think that for me, especially with figuring out things like that, so I love having a rotation, like playing WoW and playing 14. Like, I've always had this crazy rotation, whereas it's funny because obviously there are, you know, certain builds that are better and certain buttons and keystrokes that are better in Guild Wars 2, but I actually consider Guild Wars 2 to be more malleable especially with the open world, than being stuck to a specific rotation for WoW and 14. But that also might be because I don't play it correctly and I don't raid enough. I don't know. But for me, it's actually felt a lot better for combat rather than just being like, okay, so just for just to give a little bit more info on that, for WoW, I would play like a Frost Mage or an Arcane Mage. And so my rotation would be like, for an Arcane Mage, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I have enough arcane charges, so I can spend it on, an arcane barrage type thing and make sure that all of my cooldowns are up when I do it. Or Frost Mage is literally Frostbolt, Frostbolt, Frostbolt. Okay, Fingers of Frost have proc, so now I can cast Frostbolt and it's procced, so that's great. And then maybe I can cast Frostbolt into an Ice Lance, and then maybe I have time for like an Ebon Bolt in there because I can get my extra, like, a target is actually frozen or acts like it's frozen. So when I hit it with my procced Fingers of Frost type thing, and it just seems very repetitive and very, like, mathematically correct, I guess, for DPS for a rotation. And I feel like the way that I've always played Guild Wars 2, at least so far, has been more open world with exploration, even if it was on, a world boss. And I guess maybe I wouldn't have pulled the most DPS, but I feel like it's been less of a strict rotation for me so far. But again, I might not even be playing the thing that's, the best. I don't know.
That's an interesting one. I mean, the game is inherently a bit more dynamic. Cooldowns are very short. You always have a heal skill, right? You're always going to have some type of defensive, usually, that you can use to respond to things. You have a dodge roll, of course. Of course, there are rotations. And, in some ways, I actually wish they were a little bit more like WoW's rotations. Because this is kind of one of my things that I actually find a little bit uninteresting about the DPS position in Guild Wars 2, is that they are absolute. Right? You have 100% critical strike chance. You're going to have all of your boons all the time, right? Your rotation will be static. If you're playing correctly...
Right, and that's why I mentioned. I was like, I don't even know if I'm playing correctly because it's not super... Like, it hasn't gotten boring to me yet, so I don't know if it's static enough that, you know what I mean? That I actually know what I'm doing, but...
They can be pretty long, right? That's kind of what saves it a little bit. The rotations can be pretty long, so you might have to adapt them to a phase timing, for example.
Yeah.
But I actually kind of like the fact that in World of Warcraft, there is this reactive nature where it's like, oh, I got this proc. Now I need to adapt and then press this button instead. Right? I think that's pretty cool. The thing that I really enjoyed, and this is a classic, right? Was the Fire Mage. This is it's called Hot Streak, right? Hot Streak Fire Mage, where you get 2 crits in a row, and then you get an instant cast Pyroblast.
Yes!
This is amazing. This is so good. I love this. I'm blasting, I'm pumping, I'm getting my Pyroblast for free. And I think stuff like that's really fun. There is obviously a very big downside, and look, I'm going to have to say, as although I'm going to get roasted, is that, of course, this does mean that there's variance in your rotation. Right?
Oh, yeah. No roasting. That's why I mentioned it.
Yeah. No, I mean, the chat's going to roast me. The comments are gonna roast me. Okay. Yeah, and I fear the comments. I'm afraid. And yeah, that does introduce variance, right? It's like, oh no, I didn't get a proc, so my DPS sucks now. Unlucky, buddy. Right? And yeah, that's obviously very frustrating. But I think it's a bit of a pros and cons situation. I do like that rotations in other MMOs are almost a bit more dynamic, right? Because they have this element of randomness. The randomness, to be clear, it will come out in the wash most of the time, right? It will just be. You'll get this average number.
Especially if the boss fight is long enough. Like, if you were going in and burning down a boss and just... I have HFC flashbacks for the second boss. They went in with, like, 10 mages and just, like, completely burned the boss, and it was fantastic. But, yeah, it's, like, if you're in, like, an 8-minute fight, which is usually what it would round about to, between, like, 8 and 9 minutes, yeah, absolutely, it would even out. So it doesn't really matter as much.
But yeah, I mean, when you're in... more dynamic scenarios, obviously, your button pressing is going to be a little bit different in Guild Wars 2, and I think that that makes sense, right? Because if you think about PvP, right, you're not going to have a rotation as such in PvP. You're going to have a
Right.
priority, and ultimately that's what rotations are. Rotations are skill priorities. But if the combat scenario is changing, then obviously you're going to adapt that priority to what's going on, which I think is actually where the game really shines. Guild Wars 2 has a lot of potential to make PvE encounters almost a little bit PvP-like because of the way the combat system works, and I think that that stuff is really fun when that happens, when you have to be very responsive, very reactive, and survive on your own too, right? Because in other MMOs, a DPS is quite, or even a tank, right, is quite tethered to a healer, right? You can't really survive on your own. Guild Wars 2 is really cool in that the developers can set you a challenge where you need to survive and you need to use a lot of your abilities to keep yourself alive as well. That can happen in other MMOs, but I think to a lesser extent than in Guild Wars 2.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And speaking of which, I had heard, and I'm wondering if you can confirm, but that oh my gosh, what is the last strike that NA hadn't completed the challenge mode for the last strike until recently? Is that actually, can we actually confirm that right here, or was that like the only one that was recorded but it's happened?
Eagle Power is going to be he's going to be so happy to hear you say that, because you, my friend, have been memed.
I've been memed?
Yeah. Yeah, you have been memed. No, NA did take a little bit longer to clear it than EU. But no, yeah, NA has killed it, AJ. In fact, there are some amazing NA groups that regularly clear that strike mission, actually.
I thought so, and I was like, how? Like, even just, like, with content creators that I know of, like, how did it take so long? And I remember, or I'd seen tweets, because I follow Mela as well, and I was like, wait, what? It took that long? And I was even mentioning it to my husband, and I was like, can you believe this? It took that long. Okay, well, I'm glad that it's confirmed, because I thought I was nuts. And he goes, so my husband actually questioned me. He's like, that can't be right. And I was like, no, it is. Mela said it was. In a tweet.
It's very hard. It is a hard strike mission, so it's believable. But no, that is indeed not the case. That was actually a group that I was playing with. I was giving a bit of, I was coaching them, in fact.
Gotcha.
It's something that I really like that they do in other MMOs, World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, of course, is that you have this concept of an external raid leader, right? So, you know, you'll have someone who's not playing but calling. And I really wanted to try that, because it's something I'm planning to do, actually. This is going to be fun.
So you actually did it without being part of the group, like just a shot caller?
Well, weirdly, yeah, broadly speaking. Weirdly enough, for the actual kill, I actually feel really bad. This kind of sucks. I subbed in just to get a few more pulls in while someone was, taking the dogs out, basically, and dealing with some dogs in real life. They had to go for like half an hour, right?
Sure.
And I subbed in, and we killed it. Which was very unfortunate. But yeah. I was there for a few sessions. I think we did around, I want to say 8 hours, 9 hours of practice. And yeah, I was just calling. I was just raid leading externally. It was kind of a bit of a practice. I wanted to try it out because I'm planning an interesting project, actually. I'm very curious to see how this is going to go. I'm going to take 10 total noobs in Guild Wars 2. And I'm going to see if I can external raid lead them and coach them in game and beat that boss, the Harvest Temple Challenge mode, the toughest boss in the game. I think I can do it in less than 6 months. So that's my prediction. I'm making a strong prediction. Yeah, I can do it. I think I can take total noobs who have never done a raid or anything like that. I think I can take them from that level of experience to beating the hardest boss in the game within 6 months.
I mean, I'm just saying, like,
modes, everything.
They have that for, like, you know, world first race for World of Warcraft, which just happened for the first raid for Dragonflight. And it's really big for Limit Maximum and is one of the bigger guilds in Liquid. So, I mean, just saying. That's cool. That's really cool. So how do you shot call then from, like,
I do it over Discord. I was doing it over Discord.
But do you, like, see people's screens, or do you just, like, do... Yeah?
Yeah, oh yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'll be more precise. For this time, people were streaming to me through Discord.
Gotcha. Okay.
I actually might have a slightly better solution for this as well. Weirdly enough, for some tournament stuff that we're running, we actually have a streaming service set up at hardstuck.gg.
What?
Private, obviously.
I've been away for so long.
Yeah. We actually have a private setup that allows users to stream directly to our servers for very low latency, so I actually might end up using that as well. Funny enough, that was actually completely coincidental. We were actually going to use it to have synchronized cameras. I'm planning on doing a beetle racing tournament, and I want to have multiple cameras in sync, around the different places on the beetle racing track.
That's cool.
So the solution that we went with was to have basically build a very, very low latency streaming service that
sure.
The camera people, right, can stream directly to, so that we can have all these different perspectives.
I love that, but at the same time, I'm looking at this like, well, we didn't already have that, so we created our own streaming service, and that's the way we're gonna get That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Now you do.
I do. I do. It's been a long time.
Yeah, we've got merch too as well. Yeah, that's right.
What?
Guys. Yeah.
No. I didn't get to see it. Wait. What is it? What's it? Oh.
There it is. It's the hard hoodie right there. We love to see it.
Nice.
That's right. And I got that in. We got that in on the stream as well. Now everyone has to buy one.
I know. Now everyone has to buy one. I should have the link for that. I should have had that prepared. If I'd known, I would have. So we talked about what you're expecting to see with the roadmap. Is there anything that you are hoping to see, even if it's more of like a meme hope, something that you're like, this would be so cool if we were able to have this?
Good question. It's a very, very good question.
I'm all about that on the podcast, especially when I run them.
Let me think. Is there something that's really, really big?
Just like for you or for Hardstuck, something that you would love to see that's feasible for the coming year.
Huh. I'm not sure if there's anything specific that we don't already know about. To be honest, I think that if there's something that's like a little bit on the edge of possibility that I think hasn't really been talked about a little bit, it would be having a look at raids and making actually, no. Here we go. Yeah, gotcha. Got it.
Just kidding.
Got it. Yeah, just kidding. Raids dead, irrelevant. No one cares. This would be big. I think that baseline squad features should be made free. So in other words, I think that without paying the 300 gold, you should be able to have ready checks and markers and have a leader in a group. Because right now, if you don't have the commander tag, you don't have a leader, right? So you can't move people around in subgroups. Someone could take over your squad, in theory, and steal it, right? All that kind of stuff. I think that is actually no good. I think it really inhibits players taking the initiative and making their own groups, which is a big problem that the game has. So yeah, I would say that baseline squad functionality should become free. And the stuff that you pay for is basically like the public component. So in other words, having a 50-player squad, having a public a tag that appears on the map, right?
Sure.
Would also cost you the gold instead. But the actual bread and butter group functionality should be free. And if we take it into the slightly wild fantasy, I don't think this is likely because it would probably require a bit of an engine rejig. And yeah, no.
Anyway,
I think parties should be entirely replaced by squads because squads have far superior functionality. You can, for example, not being able to place markers in fractals sucks. Not being able to do a ready check in fractals sucks. So yeah, I would actually say that's something that we don't know anything about. This is a bit speculative. Me saying, oh yeah, this is on my wish list. Yeah, improvement to squad and group functionality. Boom.
So as the follow-up for that, you had mentioned that a lot more public items would still, be locked behind that. I think it's like 300 gold and like 10 or 50 badges or something. Is there anything extra that should be locked behind it then for that amount of gold if they were to swap those abilities over? Because it's like 300 gold.
Oh, the thing is only ANET know the answer to this because
Right,
only they know how relevant that 300. What I mean is, only they know how relevant the gold sink is.
Sure.
Right. I would say that if the gold sink is relevant, then yeah, they probably need to put some stuff behind it. Right. If ANET look at their numbers and go, oh, actually, this 300 gold is irrelevant. No one cares. It doesn't actually affect the economy in a meaningful way. They should remove it entirely. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. No, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
I think that if they were going to go that route, that removing it for the commander tag would make sense. But the Catmander, I feel like if they really wanted to monetize on, they probably could. Because the amount of people that prefer to have a Catmander tag than a commander tag is actually, or at least like in the community that I've seen, is actually kind of big. So if they,
I do like it.
Yeah, which, I mean, do you get anything extra or do you just get the cat tag?
So I would say the thing that you would get is the actual public thing. So basically for the free version, you don't appear on the map. You have a 10-player squad. So in other words, you don't get the little icon, the little commander pin, and you don't get 50 players available, right? If you want to get up to 50 players, then you need to actually go ahead and get the commander tag, right? And then at that point, when you tag up, that will put you splat, you're on the map, right? As a little icon, and it also allows you to have 50 players. So that will be like the thing that you'd end up paying for, which I think would be okay, right?
Yeah.
Being visible on the map, I think is pretty relevant actually.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think that would still be a feature that would encourage players to buy that, but it wouldn't be mandatory, right? It wouldn't be necessary. You'd be perfectly able to complete all of the group content and stuff like that just fine without without forking over 300 gold.
I think what I would like to see is I just started doing some World v World. Finally! It's been over a year almost too, and it feels like unless it's a certain time of day, which obviously you have, prime time for NA and EU, even with taking that into consideration, I feel like not as many people, unless they're working towards something like purchasing cultural armor that way, don't have as much of an incentive for World v World because it's a lot of things that they've already done. And so I would love to see some updates, like even, updated maps or having it be more balanced, which is something that I see a lot of people talking about. I think that would be my big thing, is if they did anything with World v World, like that was more... That was at a higher level than just like a little bit of balance, in my opinion, because it's so unique to Guild Wars 2, and I finally got into it and I was like, oh my god, it's so much fun. Like I'm running around trying to like, have deliveries made by these Doliacs or whatever, and I'm trying to contribute even though I'm at a lower level and I don't have my, exotic or ascended gear yet because I went in on my thief, which was at the time like level 40.
That's brutal.
Yeah, and then to see this like huge group of people and be like, and kind of poop your pants and be like, oh my god, there's a huge group of people, and I think it would be really cool to actually have. It probably sounds like too much to say for something like this, but more for that. And from what I've heard from other people, it hasn't been updated in a really long time, or at least you haven't gotten new PvP maps in a really long time. So I don't know if you can confirm that, but. I think that'd be really cool for World v World.
Well, right now, Arena are targeting the very, very fundamentals of World vs. World. They're reworking it with alliances, and I actually do think that a map could potentially be on the menu after that for like a total of 3 different maps, right? You've got your Alpine, Desert, and then maybe they add, I don't know, Jade Borderlands or Jungle Borderlands or whatever. So I think that is happening. In terms of balance, honestly, I think this actually might be one of the things that you'll be pleasantly surprised about, actually, when returning to the game. They've improved it significantly. And there are actually more builds than ever, I think, for World vs. World kind of general play that work really well. Roaming is a bit questionable. That's mostly because of Celestial gear. But for actual the Zerg play, the big group play, there's actually a lot of stuff right now. There's even a great Ranger build, right? Like Ranger has always been kind of the meme class, right, for large scale world versus world play. However, right now Druid is actually looking really good, and Druid is absolutely a viable option for players who enjoy Ranger to contribute at a large scale. There's a lot of builds out there. Pretty much the only thing that doesn't have like a super rock solid build is Thief, and actually even Thief, you can definitely get away with it. Something like a Staff Daredevil can
my new love.
Some balance to the table. Yeah.
And of course.
So I think the balance, honestly, is actually moving towards a pretty good state, I think.
Nice.
It's definitely an area that Arena have focused on, I think, and the development team there definitely cares about World versus World. I think they're definitely looking to invest in it somewhat significantly.
I hope so.
In the coming year.
Because it's something that I've never experienced in a game. I guess the closest thing that I can say, and I'm not actually saying that this is a valid comparison because it's not actually like parallel, but the closest thing I've experienced was like a bigger battleground in WoW. So like more of along the lines of like Alteric Valley. But even then it's not the same. And I thought it was really cool when I did it, and people were saying, not as many people are on other than prime time because there's really no reason for them to do it. And I was like, oh, we need more reason to do this. This is so cool. But speaking of updates and patches, the newest Lunar New Year patch had like 150k files that were being that were being looked at. So I'm excited. I'm hoping, because I saw that there was an update talking about possibly needing a minimum requirement now for a PC to be able to run Guild Wars 2 for, what is it, DX11?
Yeah, basically they're deprecating DirectX 9. Right.
Yes.
The game, if somehow your machine doesn't support DirectX 11, you will no longer be able to play the game.
Yeah.
Essentially, is going to be the deal, and therefore the hardware requirements are also changing. And yeah, that seems to be what happened with, or something that they're preparing for at least with this relatively large patch, is that they're updating a lot of the assets in the game to be a little bit more optimized potentially for the new engine, right? And so I think that they'll continue to do this, obviously, but I think what they're going to do and why they did this is because they want to optimize performance, right? And try to squeeze out more frame rate, because now they're a little bit less restricted in what they can do when they fully transition over to the new graphics API. So yeah, I think that's something that they'll keep doing as well. They'll try to make the game run as well as they possibly could make it run with the spicy new technology. But I'm afraid if your PC is from 2001, I guess you can't play the game anymore. You might have to finally get that upgrade.
I actually, I was picking on it too, but apparently in my chat specifically, there were quite a few people that were like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be able to play the game.
No,
and I was like,
there's
really?
no way.
Really?
No, I don't. No, they're trolling. I don't think people know. I don't think they'll actually remember just how old DirectX 9 really is. DirectX 9. When did that even come out? It was like I'm actually looking. I've gone on the internet. DirectX 9 was released on 2002. Windows 98.
Before
ME,
Vanilla
XP,
WoW.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. That there's no way. If you can't run Guild Wars 2 because you don't support DX11, then you know what? It's time to treat yourself to a new PC, okay? Because honestly, you're probably getting like 3 frames per second anyway, right? On this old potato that you've got going on there. Yeah, and even DirectX 11, right? This was 2009, right? Like,
right.
I think, well, wait, 11? But wait a minute, the latest version is 12. That must mean 11 is super modern. No, hell, even DX12 isn't really that modern.
No.
Right? It came out in 2015, right? That's a lot in video game times. That's ancient.
I mean,
right?
compared to how they
technology.
like poop out
Yeah.
graphics cards every
Yeah.
every quarter. I mean, it's not that bad, but
Yeah. So I really do think it's a bit of a non-issue, right? It's like, oh no, they're going to lose the Windows XP audience.
Oh no, I was excited because I saw that there was a patch update and I was like, oh cool. And people were talking about Lunar New Year, which I didn't get a chance to really actually participate in last year as much as I wanted to. And so I was really excited to do so this year. And then I was looking at it and the patch was coming and my internet at home isn't as good as the internet at the shop. And I was like, oh, this is like like a 1.6 gig download. Like, how is that just Lunar? Oh, it's not just Lunar New Year. So I'm actually excited to see where they go with how we were talking about framework for that. And I wonder if there's going to be something. Do you think there's a more of a DX12, direction later on rather than just DX11? Or do you think this is where they're kind of like, we're laying the groundwork for this and then getting all of the, older stuff out of the way and then we'll move forward?
So as I understand it, one of the reasons why ArenaNet chose to go with DirectX 11 instead of 12 straight away is because it was significantly easier to make that transition.
That makes
right?
sense.
Whereas going to 12 requires some pretty serious rejiggling. Could I see people, ArenaNet going to 12 at some point? To be honest, I actually think it's unlikely. Because
really?
Yeah. I think that, as I understand, the amount of work that would be required to do that would require some very, very significant reworks. I'm not sure how feasible that would actually be, just from a technological perspective. Maybe I'm crazy. I'm not familiar enough with the tech to really give you a good answer on this. I think we have to speak to somebody who really knows what they're talking about. But as I understand it, it would be a pretty serious undertaking.
It's like all I can think of is just as much as I love, Final Fantasy games with, Square is kind of, I don't know if you've ever played, Final Fantasy VII, but the remake is they started it on PS4. And then the next iteration will be available on PS5 and possibly PS4. But then after that, like, there are a lot of people that wanted to wait until every single part was out because it might be like PS7 by the time it actually gets out. So, I mean, it's understandable, but it just kind of reminds me of that. And I think that ArenaNet is doing it in an almost better way so as to not exclude people in that way that have purchased the expansions. Does that make sense? I mean, you would think that people's PCs would be updated if that's what they're playing on, or at least updated enough to be able to play on, the current graphic settings. But yeah, that's kind of what it reminds me of.
Got to move with the times, I'm afraid. Got to move with the times.
And speaking of PvE, because you'd mentioned raids and such, do you think any of the framework is updating raids? Like, do you think that telegraphs might be updated for raids as well? Kind of how we were talking about world bosses. I know that they've mainly swapped to strikes. I'm just kind of for the memes a little bit. Do you think that they'll add more telegraphing to raids to make them a bit more approachable for other people, new people, Steam people?
I think if ArenaNet target raids, what they're going to do is they'll target accessibility rather than that stuff. Raids, as long as you approach them in a sensible way, they're not that hard.
Right.
And I think that that's not actually what players have difficulty with. I think players have difficulty actually getting into the raid, right? Once you're in there, we're good. But it's getting there. That's the problem. And I mean that, to clarify, in a very literal sense. I think that actually finding the group and getting into it and finding the time to do that is where players have difficulty. So I think stuff like adding a daily raid boss would be a really good thing to do, because that's going to be like a surge of players doing a daily raid boss. Will be really, really helpful for the raid community, for example. It would also give veteran raiders a reason to pug and repeat raid bosses, right, after having done their weekly clear. Right? So I think stuff like that would be really good. I think stuff like potentially taking a further look at the some kind of story mode or some kind of easy mode, making raids scalable in some sense would be good. That definitely won't happen though. That's probably a little bit too much to make that sort of thing work. But yeah, I think improving group finding, improving the LFG, improving the social features of the game, incentivizing players to keep raiding throughout the week and go and help other players, making leadership easier, commanding easier. All that kind of stuff, I think, is where Arena is likely to target it, because those are things that can be chipped away at and don't require some kind of massive rework. Realistically, an investment in raids right now is burned money from ANET. It's not going to be worth it for them to do that. However, chipping away at these little issues that these friction points that cause raids to be a bit of a roadblock to certain players, that, in my opinion, is realistic and honestly more effective.
And so, personally, do you like the shift in attention and content towards strikes being the endgame PvP? Or, I'm sorry, PvE. Words hard.
It's yes, absolutely, and I think you can really see the fruit of that with the latest strike missions. I would say that insanely, the hardcore scene is actually one of the healthiest it's been for a very, very long time. I think a big part of that is actually because of Harvest Temple Challenge mode. I think that one single encounter has done more for the hardcore scene in Guild Wars 2 than pretty much all of raids combined. It's built a massive community around it of a lot of players working on it. There are thousands and thousands of players trying to, working for potentially months, weeks or months to take down that boss. There's a real sense of camaraderie in the scene, I think, actually. And I think a lot of players are very excited to see what comes next because the way strikes are is that they don't require ArenaNet to develop completely fresh content to be really difficult. They can just take existing content from the story and then just ramp it up to 11 and really push players if they want to. And I think that really has the interest of a lot of the very hardcore players. So I think it is the correct strategy. It would be really cool to see a raid sometime because there is something special about that. But strike missions, ultimately, I think, have proven to be the superior, certainly the superior content type. Harvest Temple CM, I mean, hell, we were talking about World of Warcraft earlier, right? But it even got the attention of indeed Max, right, from Liquid. I was actually on his stream talking about Harvest Temple. Yeah. So he interviewed me about Harvest Temple Challenge mode. He was a little interested, little spice there.
When?
This is ages ago. Like
what do you mean ages ago?
It was ages ago. The boss already came out like last year. So yeah,
well,
it was a while ago. I don't know when.
No, because exactly. I took my break before Harvest Temple CM.
Exactly.
That's why I was curious.
So, yeah.
Ages ago.
Yeah, ages ago. Yeah, you abandoned us. That's right. That's what I do. I've got a little book. I write down all the content creators who abandoned the game.
You should. I'm on your team.
How's that feel? Yeah.
Where did San go?
Yeah.
No, that's awesome though. So, is it like on YouTube? At all?
Yeah, it's on his channel and on my channel as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so did anything ever come to like fruition from that? Like was he talking about getting people to actually like and what I mean is actually like level up and do Harvest Temple?
There was actually a little bit of talk about that. I think World of Warcraft plans interfere with that because honestly, it's pretty intense. They're professionals, right? So unsurprisingly, they're obviously very dedicated to that. I would absolutely love to see a race between the two top guilds because, funnily enough, the raid leader and CEO of Echo, right, Scripe, was also in the chat asking about Guild Wars 2. So we've got both of them. We've got both sides there. We've got Echo and Liquid.
That's awesome.
Asking about Guild Wars 2. So that's kind of a fun meme. Right, a bit of a fun meme there.
Yeah, and sure. Preach has been playing too. Did you drop in on any of his streams? I only saw them. I didn't actually drop in, but I don't even know how far he is. But I think one of my biggest.
It's very cool.
Well, it's hard for me. It sounds super dorky, but like I'm so now. Like even before I took the break. Now that I'm back, I'm even more invested because I love Guild Wars 2. And it's funny because like I've been trying to play other things and get caught up in everything that I've ever had a hand in since I've been gone. And people are like, what's your favorite MMO? And I'm like, well, I like, portions of this and portions of this. And everyone's like, well, it sounds like you're really interested in Guild Wars 2. And I'm like, yeah. But it's hard for me to see, it sounds super dorky being so invested in this way, but I'm going to say it. It's hard for me to see other people trying out Guild Wars 2 and either get to 80 or almost and dip. And then, like, you don't see them because there's new content in, like, FF14 just had patch 6.3. WoW obviously had their new expansion, and the raid is out for Dragonflight. And so there's obviously other things that might keep people's attention, especially if Guild Wars 2 wasn't their main game. But it's so hard for me to invest in someone that's, like, trying Guild Wars 2, and then they dip. I do you feel that? I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's weird for me. I put all
It
my
is
eggs in a
interesting,
basket.
I think that there are a few things that cause this. Like Guild Wars 2 is a little bit different, so I think it doesn't connect with people in the same way that some of the more traditional MMOs do. For example, I think a World of Warcraft player is almost certainly going to have a pretty good time in 14, and vice versa, a lot of the time, right? Because the games have a degree of similarity and familiarity, right, when you move between them. Whereas Guild Wars 2 is a bit weird, right? It's like it's a little bit unusual. It's a bit strange, and it does take a bit of time to get going, right? This is certainly something that's really obvious when you watch new players play the game. It's like, oh yeah, this is a core game, huh? It is a very, very different to how the more modern Guild Wars 2 goes, and I do think there is something about the perception and the narrative of the game that also really kind of seeps in. Right? I think there is this idea that Guild Wars 2 just isn't a serious MMO, right? When people think about World of Warcraft and 14,
Sure.
this is like, oh yeah, boom, serious game, blast, we're raiding, we're Mythic Plus, we're doing Savage, we're doing Ultimates, big game, huge game, cat girls, weeaboos, right? You know what I'm saying? It's a really big deal. Whereas Guild Wars 2, people don't perceive it in a way to be legitimate. It's kind of like a meme game that you might play on the side for a while. And I think there is that kind of culture and narrative that surrounds it that does, excuse me, that does really prevent players from sticking. And funnily enough, this is actually what Max said in. This is really like, oh man, brutal. What a brutal statement. I don't think he intended it to be this brutal, but he said, I played the game for a couple of days, and I don't know why, but it just didn't seem worth investing in, right? It just, or something like that. It was actually correct. I'll actually just go check the quote real quick so I don't misquote anyone. But
You don't have enough
that was kind of
time.
the gist of it. Yeah. So this is the exact quote. I played the game for 2 days. I didn't feel like it felt worth the investment, even though it seemed cool. I don't know why.
That's so
and
weird
I think
to
that,
me.
weirdly enough, I think that he's not alone in that. I think that's actually how a huge amount of players feel.
Right. And
especially when they're coming from, a game like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy. I think they just kind of go,
but it was so weird for me because it was like right before EOD, you had like Silver, you had Stay Safe. I had joined, well, way further than EOD, but for an example, and a couple of others that were trying out the game, and then most recently Zepla, I believe, which makes sense that she's not playing currently because 6.3 just came out for 14 and whatnot, and Preach, and it's just like a lot of people had either gotten to 80 or almost. Like and even like I interviewed Stay Safe and Silver, and they were both like super excited to play the game, and then all of a sudden there was just like, I'm not a part of their Discord, so I don't really know. And I guess it doesn't really matter what their reasoning is. If you don't want to play a game, don't play a game. But it's just like, what happened? You know what I mean? To get that far, like not like 2 days, like Max, but it's like, what happened? Was it another game that took your attention? Was it a game that you were currently playing that you were just waiting for a patch for, and so you were just looking for content type thing? But it's hard for me because I've interviewed those people that now I'm like, I've gotten so invested in seeing their progress and they're not around anymore that I'm like, I don't know if I want to get invested in Preach. I don't know if I want to get invested in anybody. You know what I mean?
I think that it's perhaps that I think was it Burning Crusade or was it Wrath that released? Because I think that
Wrath.
Silver and Stay Safe just they had like some WoW.
Oh
I
yeah,
think they
for
had
sure.
WoW to play, right?
Yeah,
They had some WoW
absolutely.
to grind.
Yeah.
Rather than Guild Wars 2. I'm not totally sure what it is, to be honest, that causes this effect. It might be that the game doesn't really have enough goal setting, built into it basically, so players don't really feel like they have anything to do. The game kind of expects you to do your own thing and set your own goals quite a lot of the time, which is quite strange. That could potentially be it. I think the game being a little bit less... It's the Guild Wars 2 paradox. I think the game feels incredibly lonely sometimes. Even if you're surrounded by other people, your interactions with them are somewhat trivial. And I think that actually can really put players off games, especially if you're coming from, a Holy Trinity game where you're going to be very reliant. You're going to interact a lot, right, with other players because, hey, if they don't heal you, you're going to die. If the tank, doesn't tank the mobs, you're going to die. So there is that very big difference there. Whereas in Guild Wars 2, realistically, for most of the game, especially the early game, you will never interact with another player in a meaningful way. It just doesn't happen. The probability of that happening is extremely low, whereas I feel like in other MMOs, it's almost certainly going to happen multiple times along your journey. Even if it's complete randoms through the group finder, you'll still interact with them in a way that actually is relevant for gameplay. Whereas in Guild Wars 2, the interactions are very, very shallow and surface level, right? Like you're gonna, if you go to a world boss, yeah, you're surrounded by people, but they might as well be bots, right? There's no actual interactivity there. Right? No, they aren't bots, but they might as well be.
I'm joking.
Right? Yeah.
Just because of all of the recent AFK
farming
questions. Yes. But actually that, before we get to that, because I was actually planning on talking about that a little bit, is just, speaking of all of the surface level interaction between other players, one of the things that was on the radar right around EOD launch and when I had taken my break was a lot of people were saying that they didn't see a lot of people out on the map in EOD. And so there weren't a lot of people doing the metas unless you were on, the final map and getting ready for, to do Harvest Temple and things like that. And how hard that the meta was on the final map. But has that changed? Has that gotten better? Are there more people just running around throughout all of the maps in EOD? Because people were saying that, like, it would take them hours to even see one person.
So the weird thing is about Ender Dragons is that they made the most beautiful, pretty, wonderful expansion ever. Mm-hmm. But they must have realized that, hang on, if we allow the normal amount of players on these maps, it's going to be unplayable. Because, of course, it kind of lags, right? It lags pretty hard.
Right.
And essentially... they reduce the player caps on these maps. So they are a little bit quieter than you'd kind of like, especially when there's nothing going on. And the maps in general, especially Kaineng City, I think people found very disappointing because it wasn't very active unless the meta event is going on. There's not much happening. But I think everyone was looking forward to like a really big, bustling, super active city experience. It isn't that. In fact, it's pretty empty a lot of the time, which I think disappointed a lot of players. And they have fixed this a fair bit because the rewards are a lot better. They just made the rewards way better on the map, so people do them a lot more. But yeah, they're certainly pretty quiet unless the meta events are going on because, yeah, there aren't as many players on the maps, and they are quite big boss oriented to an extent.
Yeah, and that's what I was curious about, because I just remember people, like, they were all excited about joining because of a new expansion and whatever. And then they're like, but there's no one on the map. And I know that they had changed that because of, people getting overloaded or there were more things that went into it. It wasn't just how big the map was. And there were quite a few people. It was just the way that they divvied them up kind of in, like, layers, like, get on my layer type thing. And so I was actually curious if it had gotten better or was different, or if people even, obviously people are excited about like the strikes and the CMs and still getting the siege turtle, but I didn't know the percentage of people that were still playing things that were relevant to End of Dragons, if that makes sense. Like if they were on the maps collecting anything or doing any of that completion or any of those metas, or if those metas are even as relevant as previous metas for gold making or achievements and whatnot.
This is something that is kind of a problem with having all of your content in the game stay relevant forever. Right? There's a certain degree of overlap, right? Where everyone is like, oh, well, I want to do this meta. Well, I want to do this meta. So the players do tend to get spread out over time as you add more and more things to the game. Mm-hmm. Like Arena are pretty clever about this with the way that they, spread out the meta events so that you can kind of link them together, and there's not too much oversaturation in certain areas, or too much going on at the same time, so players get spread out too much. But yeah, I mean, it is, I don't know, like, I don't think it's actually a population problem. Like, people blast their content all the time in EOD. I think it's very popular. Like the only one that you might not necessarily always have a map for will be Dragon's End.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, was Dragon's End. I forgot the name of it, so I'm like, yeah, the map, The one with the
yeah,
meta that everyone was
you'll
complaining
usually,
about.
they nerfed it pretty significantly. It does still fail sometimes, and that does drive people away a little bit. I guess because people don't like losing.
The fact that it
But broadly
fails, or
speaking,
that they think it's still too
yeah, the
hard?
fact that it fails
Oh,
for
okay.
sure. Yeah, definitely the fact that it fails. Because there is this weird thing, and I don't quite understand this from ANET's perspective. Like a lot of meta events and just things in the game in general are very all or nothing. It's like you either win and you get the loot, or you fail, you get literally nothing. Which is pretty brutal, considering that it can be a pretty meaty event. And in general, look, here we go. I'm just going to say it again. If you properly prepare for Dragon's End, you will not fail, right? If you have subgroups and you tell people to take boons and you do the preparation, it's almost impossible to lose at this point, in my opinion. But it does still happen if you have a very, very scuffed group, or maybe not enough people. Not enough people is the big thing, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously on launch, everyone was going crazy to try and get this done. You'd have 60 people every single time. Now it's not totally uncommon to see maybe 45, right? If you think about that, that's a 25% DPS loss off the bat, right? Like, obviously, yeah, that's going to be a lot more of a challenge than if you had the full 60 roster of players. So that's like a big thing that can happen. But in general, I think it's still very active. I think it's cleared every single time. More or less every time there'll be at least one map that gets the job done. I think you won't have any trouble getting groups for it.
Okay. So in general, speaking of rewards, and this is just for my knowledge because I keep asking and nobody gives me an actual answer, for Dragon Ball, for the coins to be able to purchase the divine envelopes, how many wins do you actually have to have of Dragon Ball before you get one of those coins?
I have no idea.
Oh.
I'll look it up for you though.
I could have looked it up.
Yeah.
I wish I had a thing that I could Google things and look up. There's things that are
The wiki.
the wiki,
The wiki.
or
Or
a handheld computer device that you could.
That's true. The mobile phone.
Is
That's
it
definitely a good
10
one.
for one coin?
Yeah. Yeah. 10
Okay.
wins. Ouch. That's quite a lot of wins.
Because I prefer
Yeah,
Dragon Ball over the Celestial event.
Yeah, the Celestial Challenge, it's not that high energy. It's fairly low energy. There are a few good mini games there, but they're not all that good.
Yeah. Okay. I could have looked it up, but I figured since I had you here, I assumed you would know and not look it up.
No, I'm not a big festival content enjoyer, to be honest.
Really?
Nah. It's.
What about for gold making?
Yeah.
Especially for a 0 to hero. For the envelopes. Divine envelopes sell at like
I would
1.5.
I'd maybe like buy the daily 8, right, envelopes. But to be honest, that's the thing that I also did with the 0 to hero. And I should have mentioned this early on. I wanted to prove to people that you can just play whatever content you enjoy and not do anything that you don't like, and you can still progress incredibly quickly.
Oh, sure.
I don't really enjoy festival content. And in fact, this is something I will absolutely, resolutely refuse to do anything in the game that I don't like doing.
Sure.
Very stubborn about that. I won't stop. I will not do things I don't like. And yeah, I don't really like festival content. It's just a bit, it's a bit gimmicky, and
Yeah.
I want to fight a boss. I want to fight a dragon or other players or something. I don't really want to do some memes or do a jumping puzzle or something like that. I like jumping puzzles.
Yeah.
But I don't really like gimmicky minigames. It's not really something I like in my MMOs.
I
don't
will
really enjoy it.
say that because you mentioned it, because I've been trying to bounce back and forth, because obviously I mentioned the new patch for 14, and so I've been trying to get into, I have to finish 6.2 before I get to 6.3, which is the current patch that just came out on Tuesday. At any rate, talking about wanting to do things and fighting dragons, oh my god, like I love MMOs. I just love MMOs in general. There's different communities that you can get from each game, but there's so much dialogue. And it's like, I love story, I love lore, I love story, and I love dialogue, don't get me wrong. I think the game is incredible, but oh my god, like like you said, I want to fight things, I want to fight dragons, and I'm just like, clicking, when do I get to the fight? I know it's irrelevant to the current conversation except for that, but I was trying to do it the other night, and I was like, oh my god, when does the combat start? When do I get to start exploring? This is so much dialogue. Which is why I think that when people were asking me, what I liked about different MMOs and what was actually my main MMO, I never really considered one to be my main, But it has to be Guild Wars 2, I guess, because I would talk about, like, pros and cons for other games. And I'd be like, there are pros and cons to everything, but for Guild Wars 2, I like this, and this. And I guess that doesn't really leave much room for other MMOs now, does it? So I know it was a little bit off topic, but oh my god, I was like, this is long and arduous and is a lot of dialogue, and I understand wanting to get through your story, but oh my god, I want to get into combat. I want to do something. So I know what you feel. Did you ever have a period of time where you actually liked the events, or did you always feel this way?
Oh yeah, this has never been my thing. Like
No?
when it comes to MMOs, I fight things. I don't collect. I don't care about achievements. I don't care about pixels, like skins and cosmetics. Like all this stuff is worthless to me. I don't care. I want to fight stuff. I'm here for the combat system.
And I know we've mentioned it a little bit, and we did say that it was a whole other can of worms, but I've seen a lot about people complaining about botting and AFK peeps lately. Did you want to weigh in a little bit on that? I feel like I know about the daily login rewards, and I know that people were upset about the fact that you could sit there and log in and get a good amount of items and work on things. Obviously, it wouldn't be as,
I just think people haven't really thought this through. To be honest, like I think people don't like the idea that they're unfairly getting gold, right?
Sure.
But hi everyone, you can buy gold in this game legally. Irrelevant, totally irrelevant. Yeah, I know these guys came over from BDO, right? BDO, pay to win game, of course.
Never played it.
So people are used to swiping. And these guys, they had 7+ legendaries day one. They had all of the rare infusions within the first week. Full best in slot gear, all their characters with max bag slots, maxed out all MTX, all quality of life MTX within a couple of days. They nuked like 10 grand. Because they're used to it, right? In BDO, some of these guys apparently spent over 100K in BDO.
Is that what it's like? I've never played.
Oh yeah. It's well, I mean, obviously you don't have to spend money, but
Sure.
if you want to kind of get stuff done, then you got to swipe a fair bit.
Gotcha.
And whenever I realize this, it's like, wait, why do we care about people like AFKing and farming 5 gold an hour on a couple of accounts when anything you do in the game, any farm you do is worthless compared to like a normal job and then buying gems, right? So I don't think people have really thought it through. Is it bad? Yes. Should people get banned for doing stupid stuff like this? Absolutely. Is it really a big deal that's impacting the economy or making the game worse? Absolutely not. It's completely irrelevant. Right, it doesn't do anything. There aren't even that many people doing it really. There's maybe like I don't know, like hundreds, maybe 1,000 of these kind of accounts doing this at any given time, and that sounds like a lot. But then you go, wait a minute, Guild Wars 2 isn't a dead game, so actually it's not a lot. And players doing regular content are generating so much gold. If you think about how much gold players are generating doing meta events, logging into the game with daily login rewards, doing fractals, doing strike missions, it's going to completely dwarf the amount of gold that players are getting from AFK farming. I memed about this on Tea Time recently, and look, the biggest problem about AFK farming is that it looks terrible. It's like, whoa, what the hell is going on here? If you're a new player and you see this, you're going to go, wait a minute. This game infested with bots? What is this? And,
I mean, if you're new to MMOs in general, then yeah. But like, if you were around for World of Warcraft during Mist of Pandaria, where they like upped food that was all based on fish, and everybody had fishing bots, and then like those people that were botting for fish would literally, like, legitimately, they would create new accounts and get other people to help them be raid ready so that they could go world first for raids, because that was how many people were botting for fishing. Like, that's when it's a problem. And I'm only saying this out of experience for that. I haven't really experienced that I know of botting in Guild Wars 2, so I'm just saying that out of experience for like back in the day for WoW, but like, so I don't even really know how much of an issue it is for Guild Wars 2 in everyone's opinion, but coming from that, I knew this guy who literally got banned for fish botting after they purposely made everything come from fish, and in in a really unrealistic way to be able to provide food for the raid group, right? So if you had like 2 or 3 people that specifically their crafting job was to be able to give everyone food for your raid group, like it was almost unfeasible even then. And so it's funny hearing people talk about bots for Guild Wars 2.
Well, I mean, it is pretty bad because the problem is that ArenaNet are not doing that much about it right now.
No.
There's not much of a response there. It's pretty bad. I do think they need to do something about it because, again, it's just a bad look. It looks a little bit weird, looks a little bit ridiculous.
Sure.
And there are, of course, some other issues where, these bots, some of them are just people AFK, by the way. They're not all bots. But where they're taking up spots on maps, right? They're filling up maps and not directly participating in what's going on. That's also a potential issue. So it definitely does need to be solved, but it's been blown out of all proportion. People are pretending like it's ruining the economy, right? Like it's destroying everyone's time, right?
It's drama.
No.
It's good for the YouTube.
Right? It isn't doing that. It isn't. And the thing is that even a cursory analysis of the situation will tell you that it isn't. Again, this is a game where you can buy gold. Newsflash, right? Gold generation in game should not be your concern because no matter how efficiently you farm, even if you are playing on 10 accounts at the same time, someone swiping their credit card is going to outpace you with zero effort whatsoever. So if you care about unfairness, you probably care about that way more. Again, I would always bring up the example of the guys from BDO. They swiped 10 grand within 1 week, and they probably got more progression on their account within 1 week than most people will in their entire lifetime, right, on their account. They got further than people ever will. And if
but
you
is
think that's
that
unfair,
a problem,
hey, that's fair enough. Well, I mean...
When you talk about it that way, like...
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, I think that people do tend to shy away from this with MTX games. If you care about that, then that could be a problem. I think it's a legitimate reason to not like the game. I think it's one of the things that Guild Wars 2 players tend to not accept about Guild Wars 2 as a reason to not like it.
Sure.
But it absolutely is. If you don't like the fact that you can basically swipe and pretty much progress your account really, really quickly, that's totally fair if you don't like that. Guild Wars 2 probably isn't the game for you. Personally, I actually don't care at all. And this is why Guild Wars 2 is such a good game for me, because I don't care about account progression.
Yeah, I don't really either.
At all. Right?
I know people that do,
people,
which is why I asked the questions.
Yeah, some people do. Yeah, some people do. And yeah, I think that it's a legitimate issue that you could have with the game, for sure. If you perceive that as unfair, then hey, yeah, don't play Guild Wars 2.
Yeah, I think the only thing, and I don't think it was a bot. I don't really know what the code has been, or writing script for bots for Guild Wars 2. I have no idea, obviously, because normally I don't really care. But I think the most I've seen is actually, funnily enough, with Lunar New Year. I've seen people like AFK in, the Celestial challenge, and also in the in Dragon Ball, which apparently isn't even as good as the Celestial challenge. So it's just kind of funny. But
I mean, that is pretty funny.
But that's the most I've seen. Whereas, like, for other games, other MMOs specifically, I would see it all the time, and it was just kind of, you knew people that did it, and you just didn't really worry about it. I don't know. But what are the procedures that ArenaNet has in place?
I don't think they really have that much right now, to be honest. I don't think they have a lot of anti-cheat in the game, to be honest. It's quite hard because there's a lot of things that you can do in the game legitimately that look like cheating. For example, there was a very funny incident a while ago, very long, this is ages ago to be clear, but someone was spamming teleport to friends all over the place, and they actually got timed out for this. They got suspended because their systems picked up that they were teleport hacking. But the problem is that Arena have basically added teleport hack into the game, right, in a limited capacity. So it's really hard for them to test this. And the problem with AFK farming is that there's a lot of benefit of the doubt involved here. Why? Because, hey, you can actually set any ability you want to your auto attack. So this is why ANET can't really ban you for this, not very effectively anyway, is because in theory, you could actually, well, in fact, I know a guy, Incredible Sushi. he does AFK farming, but in a TOS compliant way. He'll be working on his computer, and on his other monitor, second monitor, he will have 5 to 10 alt accounts, all AFK farming. But he'll be at his keyboard. And the Guild Wars 2 Terms of Service states that you are allowed to do this as long as you are actually at your machine and you are able to basically respond to a developer. You know, if a GM messages you, and you need to be able to respond to that, basically. You can't actually be away from your computer. So this is why they can't ban you for this, because they don't actually have a good way of proving that you're fully AFK without like manually checking every single person, right? And the methodology that players use to AFK farm is actually a built-in feature provided by the game. And they obviously cannot ban you for using a built-in feature provided by the game. That's why this issue is so difficult for ArenaNet to resolve.
It's actually kind of funny, too, because I feel like for Guild Wars 2, compared to like other MMOs that I've played, the actual AFK timer for it to actually say that you're AFK and DC you from the game is so much longer. Like, have you felt that too? Or is it just me?
Yeah, like it is a while. Longer. You know, you can definitely you can hang around for a while. And if you keep using actions, using the autocast, then you really won't go anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that because I don't even.
Yeah.
But just standing there, I've been like, oh, I didn't realize I was still in the game. I'll log out, you know. Yeah. But I don't know of Guild Wars 2 ever having server issues in that capacity either. Where like I know that especially for 14, when new patches come out or the expansion, they have an even shorter duration for AFK because they're trying to get other people in the game because like servers are full. I don't know if that's ever been an issue for Guild Wars 2.
No. This is actually one of the best things about the way Guild Wars 2 is set up. The game's server architecture is very good. They don't have downtime, and there are no queues. Never happened. There's been a few very rare outages where they've had issues with some of their servers. But other than that, no. As far as I'm aware, the game has some of the best uptime, if not the best uptime, out of any major MMO. In fact, it probably is the best uptime out of any major MMO. I'd be really surprised if that wasn't the case.
That's awesome, though. I'm super excited for everything that's to come. I'm so glad I'm back. And speaking of all of the updates that they've been making, I know this is kind of an older topic, but since I was gone, the re-implementation of the story for Living World Season 1, how do you, in your opinion, think that that's gone over for everyone to be able to experience that weren't part of the game when it was live?
So I think people definitely enjoyed going back to it, but I also think the rose-tinted goggles really came off. I think a lot of players actually didn't really experience it, to be honest, and so it's new. But I think it really hasn't aged super well compared to the modern content. It's very obvious. It's very dated. The way the dialogue is, the way the story instances are, it's extremely old hat compared to the new Guild Wars 2. So I think people were in for a little bit of a shock there with how that ended up playing out. But I think overall it was a very positive experience. Especially, they went the extra mile. They added stuff like the marionette back into play, the battle for Lion's Arch as well. They fully remade some of this stuff in pretty cool ways. So I actually think it was overall very, very positive, and I think that the player base approves. Obviously, you know, it kind of sucks to not get any fresh content. It would have been really nice. But for a lot of players, it is fresh content, and I think everyone would agree that it's good for the game, even if it hasn't aged super well.
I'm super excited to see if they do anything with dungeons. I know it probably sounds silly because everybody is like, the current, you know, fractals are better than dungeons, but I prefer the mechanics that are in dungeons better, and I prefer actually like trying to figure out the mechs and having it. I like the idea that it takes longer, and so I'm hoping that eventually there'll be more of a dungeon refresher. There probably won't be because they're, you know, strikes and fractals, but that's another one of my hopes. World v World, new maps for PvP, and dungeon refreshers, even if it's just like updates to the dungeons that are already in game, like even more so. That's my goal. My hope. Not my goal. I'm not working on the dev team.
The thing with dungeons that I think they could do, and is potentially possible, is making them soloable, the story modes, right? Making them solo friendly, and actually directly integrating them into the personal story. Because, you know, this actually is kind of based off my experience when playing the game. When I first played Guild Wars 2, I was like, okay, I'm going to blast the story, then we're going to get into dungeons, let's go. I'm going to play World vs. World, I'm going to play PvP, let's go. And I was playing through the story, And halfway through it, just in case I won't spoil it, but a bunch of characters who aren't friends at the start suddenly become friends, and I was like, wait, what? What happened? What did I miss? Was I not? Did I just sleepwalk through this? No, it's because all of that, a lot of the really important interactions between some of these characters happens exclusively in story mode dungeons.
Yep.
Right. And if you don't play through the story mode dungeons as you're leveling, you're going through the story, you actually miss out on incredibly important parts of the story. And the story it won't exactly not make sense, but it will make significantly less sense if you don't do this. And I think it's a very common mentality. I don't think my mentality was uncommon. I was like, yeah, blasting leveling, let's go. We're going to do dungeons after that. Let's have fun. I think a lot of players do that. And as a result, they really have a weird experience. So I think basically making story modes soloable and then putting it into the story directly would actually be really cool. You could even do some kind of like auto group finder for that, I think, because the story mode dungeons are ridiculously easy now because they've been out power crept so hard. So they're essentially trivial. So throwing that in there, I think will be really, really cool. You could even make them scalable, right? So, they scale down if you've got one person, but they scale up a little bit if you have 5. A little bit like dragon response missions. Yes.
I liked the idea of them when I first started doing them. But then as I got to like the third one, I was like, this is the same thing over and over and over. I liked the idea of them. I thought it was cool. And I liked the story behind them. And the ones that were actually different I thought were fun. But the fact that it was the same thing and then you just continued to queue, I never thought that I would get burnt out on something like that. And I did. When I was actually trying to finish that before End of Dragons, I actually got burnt out because of Dragon Response missions.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be of the view that I cut ANET a bit of slack when it comes to Dragon Response missions, to be honest. And that's because of their position that they were in.
And I get that, like COVID stuff and all of that. But,
it's not even that. I don't want to be over dramatic, but that period of the game was the closest Guild Wars 2 ever came to dying.
Really?
Right? Absolutely, yeah. The end of Season 4, right? I mean, I'm sure everyone remembers this. It was very much okay, roll credits, everyone's sailing off into the sunset, game over. I remember watching that cutscene for the first time, and I should be happy, right? Because we beat a really big villain. It's feels good.
I still don't.
It was kind of
think he's a villain.
I like my initial thought was like, wow, holy shit, the game's over.
Yeah.
That I immediately thought, wow, this is actually it. The thing that we were worried about, it's happening. It's actually game over. For Guild Wars 2. And to an extent, it was. This was actually spoken about a little bit. One of the writers for the game, ex-writer again, a slightly controversial ex-writer, in fact, spoke about this a little bit, so it could be slightly unreliable. But she was talking about how they were instructed to make the ending of Season 4 work as an ending, basically, as a potential game over. But also be open-ended enough that if they kind of go, okay, right, we can maybe do a bit more, right, if we need to. It was absolutely that period of time of the time was like a serious like, whoa, is Guild Wars 2 actually kind of winding down, going into maintenance mode? 100%.
Dude, that just gave me chills.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of scary, right? Like, I think that not many games have like a brush with death and in that way, and then kind of make that recovery. But Guild Wars 2 definitely did. And Icebrood Saga was supposed to be kind of semi-maintenance mode, but then basically no, they kind of scrapped it halfway through and then made an expansion, which is why the Icebrood Saga ended up incredibly scuffed, is because instead of it being like a full-fledged developed thing, it was very much half finished and half baked because all the devs were working on the expansion instead.
Yeah, that's I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was that period of the game's history, 2019-ish, was. I mean, it probably wasn't like actually that close to shutting down. That simply doesn't happen, right? Like,
sure.
Worst case scenario, it would have been, okay, it's maintenance mode, basically. But it was absolutely the closest moment to the game being wound down significantly into just like a legacy product that the game has ever had, for sure.
That's just so crazy to me, because just thinking of the way everything's been promoted, even where if you think about all of the social media accounts, right? For ArenaNet, most of them aren't ArenaNet, even though they might be there, they're Guild Wars 2. And so the idea that it came that close to possibly being maintenance mode is so crazy, because that's their biggest project. I mean, right? Like, it's the project.
The big catalyst that changes, right, is that basically all of their unannounced they had multiple unannounced projects going on. They all got cancelled. Right, and then that was when it's like, okay, Icebrood Saga, boom, let's go. And then after that, like, oh, no, not that, expansion instead, right? So there was this massive turmoil, a huge amount of turmoil during this time in the game's history, where it went from, okay, let's just do some kind of passive ticking content while we make our other stuff, to, oh, no, other stuff dead? Okay, make something for Guild Wars 2. Icebrood Saga. NCSoft comes along. Actually, no, screw that, make us an X-Pack. Oh, that game director, gone. How about another game director, gone, right? And here we are.
It's so crazy to talk about it in that way, because I feel like that's not a way we've ever talked about it. Like, everybody is, including myself, has always been super excited about End of Dragons, and I hadn't gotten to Icebrood Saga yet, and everybody was like, it gets slow, and I'm like, no, it'll be fine. I think it'll be fun. And then I got there, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, and without knowing anything like that had happened, I got there and I was like, I can't do this. I can't. This is a lot. So, yeah, I don't know. Just DRMs felt just repetitive. But then again, I mean, I've played other MMOs that sit there and reuse content all the time and just give extra mechanics, and they're like, this is new content, yay. Without naming any names, because I don't want anybody to be mad at me. But you had mentioned that you were working on a lot of projects, and I've kept you for quite a bit. So what, if you can tell us, other than being just an outside raid lead, are you working on currently? Like, what has happened with Even Hard Stuck since I've been gone?
So we're still kind of in the catch-up phase, in a sense, right? Because we're trying to keep up with the metagame in terms of getting all of our builds up to date. Like, right now, we've got hundreds of builds, actually, on the site that are slowly being brought up to snuff. So that's kind of like the first main goal that we have. A really big thing for me is going to be consistent competitive events. Like, I recently ran a slightly new style of tournament called the Ready Check Cup for raids. And
I did see that.
A big goal for me this year is going to be making sustainable competitive events. So historically, I've actually made a loss on pretty much every single tournament I've ever run, because ultimately Guild Wars 2 is a small game. There isn't really a lot of financial incentive, and hey, sure, that's how it goes. It's a passion project. I'm totally cool with that. But I'm trying to actually make it work so that I can invest more of my time and more of my resources into that. I'm also very heavily working on building in-game communities, trying to encourage players to lead. For example, I want to run a competition for leadership to really encourage players to take up the mantle of commander. So we're building a lot of tools for this, right? We're going to be making, hopefully, some add-ons for the game that will have kind of easy mode leadership. For example, I want to have some copy-paste messages for every single boss in the game that commanders can simply use, and maybe even potentially activate with a hotkey. From an add-on, so you can kind of get over the knowledge barrier, right? I want to really streamline that process of taking a leadership position and learning about how the game works in that regard. That's another pretty big project that we want to do. We've got a bunch of other kind of gizmos on the site, right? One thing that I particularly like is our team builder that kind of allows you to play around with building a squad and how all the boons fit together in a sandbox environment. That's pretty cool. Working on, we've got all of our guides going for all of the PvE content in the game. We're working on challenge modes there as well, of course. And there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Discord's still going. We've got a lot of activity on Discord right now. A lot of new people taking up the mantle, leading stuff, doing raid training, like leading open world stuff, all that sort of thing. We've got merch. We've got, I don't know, like a whole bunch. We've got streams going on. I'm going to try and make a try-hard division and really push, see how good I can get at the game and make a really
try-hard division.
I
got pooped on for wanting to do an Iron Man. Did I ever tell you about that? Not me myself, but I was excited to put together this Iron Man, and a bunch of people like did it, and then they were like, they kept dying, right? And they're like, "This is too hard. Why would you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm giving away incentives and however gems worth of items." And they're like, "But this is too hard. Why would you ever do this?" I'm like, "Because it's a challenge and it's fun." But people were upset about it. Like, they were like, "This is dumb. Why would I ever do this?" Like, okay, you could just say that you didn't complete it. That's fine.
It's a very natural response, I think. I think when players lose, especially when there's actual loss, right? I think that can be very, very painful. Like, when you die in an MMO, realistically, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
If you die and you have to delete your character or you lose items, that is obviously a lot more of a blow. I think players need to either don't engage with the game that way or kind of get used to it. For example, the thing that I have actually really enjoyed was actually the World of Warcraft Hardcore Challenge for Vanilla WoW.
Yeah, it's effectively the same thing as the
yeah,
what I was doing
exactly what it is. Yeah. And if people were complaining about dying in Guild Wars 2, wait until you see Classic WoW. So I went from 1 to 60. It took me around 100 hours to do it. So if I died 90 hours in, that is, I have to restart and go back to level 1 to complete that. And I've seen it happen. I've seen people die to level 57 wolf. You know, like, it happens, right? Like, level 57 wolf can just eliminate you. Level 57 zombie just shuts you down immediately. And yeah, I don't know. Like, if you don't like risk, don't do things that involve risk.
But
and to be honest, bit of a call out here. 1 to 80 without dying in Guild Wars 2 is actually not even hard.
Well, mine was plus story.
So there it is.
You had to do all the story stuff too.
Yeah. Plus the stories.
But it was funny because I was like, "Oh, this is, the challenge that we're running, the tournament. Like, here are the stakes, here are the things." And people are like, "That's too hard. Why would I ever do that? I'm not going to do that." And I was like, "Here's the thing. So don't." Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, don't do it.
But people were complaining about it. Like there were a lot of people that were really excited about it, and there were other people that complained about it. And I was just like, I'm not making you. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. But I've just never seen. So I'm excited to see, what happens with everything with Hardstuck in the future. And I'm excited to, guys, hardstuck.gg, check it out. Actually, since I have you here, one of my other most irritating things that I've seen, and I don't know if you've seen this, and it's really not that big of a deal, and obviously it depends on the person, which, like, obviously anything you see or hear on the internet, take with a grain of salt. But I think one of my most annoying things is if, like, this hasn't happened to me, but I've, like, witnessed it, is getting into a group for something and have someone laughing at someone's build and voice. Just being, like,
whoa,
laughing at it.
That's a little too far. That's out of control.
Right.
This is what I'd say. This is what I'd say to anyone who feels this way. If you ever find yourself laughing at someone who's played 1,000 hours less than you, always remember that the person you're laughing at is how you look to someone who's played 1,000 hours more than you.
But I think that's the only thing really in the game that I've come across. And I totally get that there are rotations that people might not know about or metas, but, like, when you actually laugh at someone for their build, and this is something I have come across, and obviously, like, it didn't matter to me, because for me, I'd be like, yeah, bitch, I'm playing this, whatever, because I firmly believe that I have the most fun with this, and obviously I might not have been doing well enough for the group, and I could have excused myself if that was the thing, but it wasn't even me, it was someone else, and it was someone that I didn't know, and it was someone laughing at that person, and I was like, really? That's how we want to come off to new people in Steam. So I just didn't know if you'd ever experienced that, like, if someone didn't know that you had, like, an ult in a raid or something like that, or a fractal or anything else like that, and if you'd ever come across that for someone that was a commander putting something together. It's only happened once, but I will never forget it.
Oh, I mean, and this stuff happens all the time. I mean, well, I say all the time, but I mean, this is standard MMO stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it doesn't bother me, because I'm
if you
used
put
to it.
human beings together, there is going to be toxicity. Like, even if we're living in a post-apocalyptic scenario and there's 2 people left on the entire planet, there is one thing that you can be certain of. It's that there will at least still be at least one argument. This is just the nature of human interaction. There's always going to be disagreement. There's always going to be conflict. And there's always going to be a degree of toxicity. I don't think it's a major issue in the game. I think general, to be honest, I think people genuinely don't care about your build. Whatever build you play, I think almost nobody cares, as long as you're doing your job, right? Like, this is the thing, and this is where you have to be a little bit careful. If you get kicked from a group, you're almost certainly not getting kicked because of what you play. You're getting kicked because of how you performed.
Yeah.
Right? If you get kicked for doing 5k DPS on Necro, and then you say, I got kicked for playing Necro, wrong. You got kicked for doing 5k DPS. Right? I'm incredibly confident in this. I'd put money on it, a lot of money actually. Getting kicked purely for your elite specialization or your profession is ludicrously uncommon. It definitely happens. Obviously there's some real dumbasses in the game, right? I mean, hey, just like any other community, right? It's going to happen, but it is vanishingly uncommon, right? It's almost always going to be, hey, why is our quickness uptime 20%? And you said you gave quickness. Or why aren't you healing? You said you were a healer. That's what you're going to get kicked for.
Yeah. And it's actually funny because I just saw, was it Regal Power you said that would be happy knowing that I fell for the meme for Harvest Temple?
Ah, yes.
Regal.
Yes, Regal Power.
I fell
Good
for the
news.
meme.
Yes, Xandri believed that you guys were NA first Harvest Temple CM.
Like,
she was
last
very
week.
excited. Yeah, very good. Very, very good. Well done, my friend. You were successfully memed.
I saw it on Twitter and I was like, yay! I think I even retweeted it. I was really proud.
There you go. Very nice. Very, very nice.
I've been gone, though.
Yeah.
And everybody always picks on NA raid scene. So I legitimately was like, wow. They did it.
NA got through the fight.
We were, though, yeah. Well, that's why NA raids, that's why I was like, oh, because everybody always says things about NA, like, NA doesn't have enough this, NA doesn't have enough that, and I was like, oh, snap, they did it. Has tons of kills. I was waiting for you to say, like, NA has a handful of kills, keep up, and I'd be like, oh.
Keep it up, NA. Good job. Now, NA has some of the really good groups, just to be clear, they have some really good groups.
Yeah.
But, EU does tend, it's got a few very sweaty groups on EU. I think it will be very interesting to see how the next really hard fight goes down. I think there are going to be a lot more groups that will attempt to clear it early on.
I'm excited to see what the next really hard fight is.
Where
do they go from here?
This is a super interesting one in my opinion because here's the thing. The next fight, even if it's harder, will almost certainly look easier. And what I mean by that is it will die faster. Because the teams are going to prepare so much more and be so much more try-hard the next time around that even if the fight is more challenging, the player base is skilled up significantly. There have been moments in the game's history. It's super interesting. For example, one of the hardest fights in the game is called Doom CM. I'm sure you've heard of it. Very famous encounter. That took a week to kill when it came out, but just under a week. Just a touch under a week. If that same fight released today, with current player skill, it would die day one. That's how much the community's progressed. So that's with modern understanding of builds and theorycraft, and player skill in general has gone up sufficiently that would die day one, without a shadow of a doubt.
That's awesome.
And that will be true for almost every encounter in the game. Everything would get killed immediately. And there are these big kind of skill jump moments, and the Strike Mission Challenge mode, particularly Harvest Temple Challenge mode, is definitely one of those. It was a big skill up moment for the community overall, I'd say.
Yay. Yay, NA. But no, I said it probably 20 minutes ago. I've kept you a lot longer than I had anticipated. Is there anything else that you wanted to let people know of that's on the horizon? Anything about yourself and or Hardstuck that you haven't already mentioned? And also, are you going to be setting up streams so I can raid you?
I'm not. I am not streaming today.
What?
You know, because I'm touching grass. We told about this. This is
You're
I'm
going
on my
outside
touching grass arc. Yeah, that's right.
At almost 11.
Yeah. That seems like a good idea. Now, nice. Nice
Oh yeah, the
stroll
shop.
outside, hit the gym. All that kind of stuff. Let's go. Yeah, definitely go shop.hardstuck.gg. Definitely go on hardstuck.gg.
I'm opening
buy all the
link.
Merchandise. Read all the guides.
Do I get a discount?
Right. All that kind of stuff. Maybe we can arrange that. That's possible. Get in there. Yeah, I know. That's all I've got, really. I got nothing else to say. It was a very good show. Very interesting. Thank you for having me, of course. And
yeah, thank you for
be sure to follow this stream. Subscribe to Zandri
follow
on
Teapot.
YouTube. Okay,
you probably already are, but...
yeah, and definitely follow me. Follow me on Twitter. My goal, you may not disagree, you may not agree with me all the time, but you know what? I will guarantee that your Guild Wars 2 experience will be exciting.
Wait, so I have a question about the merch. I know it's a minimalist zipper hoodie, but where's the hoodie, zipper hoodie that has the big Hardstuck logo that's on the... Yeah.
We don't have that.
What?
We need a maximalist.
That's what I need.
You know what? That's okay. We actually have the artist in the chat right now, so we can give that feedback over there.
I need that.
Yeah.
I need what's on the front of the pullover to be on the back of the zip-up.
Wow. There you go, then. That's the feedback. And yeah,
with my name.
V2 incoming. Oh. I would love to be able to do that. That'd be so cool. I'm not sure we can do that right now, but it'd be pretty sick.
But
team
absolutely.
Things. Give us feedback. But anyway, yeah, you know the deal. Follow me everywhere at my Teapot. Go out to hardstuck.gg. Join our Discord.
Yeah,
come back and watch every single day. Watch the stream. Definitely leave a comment. I want to see some comments here, right? I want to see more. I want to see an infestation of YouTube comments. Otherwise, I'm not going to be happy, right?
I need Hardstuck underwear. Oh.
Yeah.
Are you?
That is an option. Funnily enough, this the merch product we have. They've got a lot of. You can get swimwear, Hardstuck swimwear.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, wow.
Hardstuck bikini.
Yeah, that is one of the options. Yeah.
I'm gonna add the Speedo.
It's very comprehensive. Yeah. Got Hardstuck Speedo as well. Yeah, it's a good call. Yeah.
As if we go outside. You guys are cute. Oh,
anyway,
I was gonna. Are you gonna be putting this on YouTube as well?
Yeah, I probably will.
Okay. I was just curious. I wanted to make sure so that I could let people know. Cool.
Yeah.
But thank you guys so much for hanging out. Well, now I have to find out somebody else to send you guys to.
Yeah.
I had it all planned out. I was gonna send them to you. And now I'm conflicted. Oh, wait. Can you suggest a Hardstuck person to send people over to?
Oh, there's a few interesting options here, actually.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There are too many interesting options. I had a plan. Now I don't have a plan.
Let's see. I mean,
Laura. Oh, is she still on? She was playing
Lara, yeah, Lara is on Final Fantasy. Very cozy streamer there. For Guild Wars 2, It's Kyoshi is very cozy. I would say Zeus GW2 is also good content. Now this guy, Zeus GW2, I'm almost convinced. He role plays as a god, right? He's Zeus. He's a god, Greek god RP. And I'm actually he actually might be a god, because he queues over 1,000 games of ranked PvP every season. And I'm not totally convinced that any mortal man will be capable of doing that without being driven completely insane.
All right, you've convinced me. We're going in for Zeus. Everybody
so
click.
That could actually
get ready.
That's a potential option there.
There you go. Yeah. But yeah, for sure. All of the Teapot stuff, I'm pretty sure it's /Mighty Teapot for everything, which is great. Makes sense. Totally streamlined. So make sure to follow, do the thing, subscribe, and when you get into Zeus's channel, make sure to say hi. Yes. Let him know that Zan and Teapot sent you.
That's true. We did.
And I will see you guys tomorrow. It's Friday, so around 2 p.m. at the latest is when I will be on. Are you planning on streaming tomorrow?
I'll be here. Probably. Maybe. I'm awake. I'm fresh.
Thank you guys for hanging out. I'll see you tomorrow.
Farewell, friends. Take it easy.